Live streaming is on.
Hello and welcome to meeting number 126 of the Extinctionati. Today or this evening is the 27th of November 2022, which is a balmy spring in London. The weather has been terrifyingly pleasant. I've been walking around in my very light jacket and a t-shirt and actually feeling rather warm. How's the weather with you guys?
Storms and storms. Beautiful skies, lots of wind, hailstones, high seas, and noise around a lot. That's all I can say for the last 2 weeks. Every day.
Is that normal for the time of year?
Well, it can happen, but there it's relentless. Yeah, it's the time of year in Ireland where, a bit, but yeah, I would say it's increasing in frequency. The depression. I mean, the pattern of the Atlantic is all effed up anyway. So yeah. Yeah.
In the U.S. Midwest, it's been warm. We've had, I think the high was 52 yesterday. We have not had much snow, and today it's in the 40s, high of 42, which is still considerably warm.
It's raining in the east here, and it was not supposed to rain Friday, and it rained on Friday. And it's going to be 59 degrees today, Fahrenheit. That's too warm, but
Well, here, as I was telling, I don't know if I mentioned it the last time or did I mention it to somebody in a private call, but I'm amazed to see the flowers still growing, and marigolds are outside in the garden like if it was the summer. And there's some little trees that are budding, and it's really not right because it's so mild. Even though with the storms, the temperatures are still very, very high here. And the growth, you can say by the growth, there's a lot of grass too. It's just not, it's not burnt like usually in the winter and getting cold and shriveling. And there's so there's a mildness around.
Yeah, I don't know about the outside world. I've been watching the banned World Cup in football, so I've been a naughty boy, but mostly indoors.
I have absolutely no interest in competition games, so I just it's out of my scope. This thing, I heard about it. You can't not hear about it because it's on every media everywhere. It's not a big thing, I suppose, but I have no interest personally.
I guess it's kind of a childish thing. If everybody tells you that you are not really allowed to see it, you want to see it. Just curiosity, a bit like David Icke, I think. Yeah.
Well, for me, it's no difference because I never watch it. So whether it's this year or last year or 10 years ago, it's like another planet to me. Like I look at people and I think, okay, fine, but I just I don't get it.
There's also two or more football fields, giant football fields in the middle of the desert. It's a very, very strange phenomenon. Without the oil and the immense wealth of the nation, they could never have even a single small-scale football match, I think, in that country. So that's kind of interesting.
Leave the desert alone. uh, Wanda, what's this? Oh no, I'm getting a message. So have we got any topic for today, or Bob, do you want to introduce the meeting maybe? Have we got people who want to join? London, are you there? Hello, London. Bob is not. I think you mentioned earlier that you had some microphone problems, so that could be the case.
I think he's depressed because of the performance of England in the World Cup. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh, you're talking in this alien language.
I'm just teasing you.
I know.
You know, I could tease him about the Green King, but you know,
Oh yeah.
this week it's the World Cup.
Yeah, it's the sort of little travels in the world of the normies, and you kind of walk around that like wearing a coat and a mask, and you watch everything that's going on, but you don't want to stay there too long because it's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. It's like looking at the at the main media news online, or reading the media newspapers. It's just something you want to have a shower afterwards, kind of thing. Do you know? You just want to think, okay, why did I do this? Mm.
I think watching the news in the shower is a good idea if you can manage.
That's a good. That's a good one. That would be actually more efficient, energy-wise, and all sort of energy. I mean, just mental energy as well. Because it drains you really to be too much exposed to all this in terms of energy. Talking for myself, because I'm quite a sensitive person, and if I get too much exposure to all this shite, I feel I'm covered with muck. You know, like you say, don't wrestle with pigs, you'll get covered with mud. You know, it's a bit like that. You don't want to do too much of that. Actually, it can. At the moment, I'm personally very a bit more recluse than ever in terms of encounters with people, and even online. I'm much less online at the moment. The evenings are long, because the days are very short now in the winter here. It gets dark very early, so. But I'm going to bed really early too, so.
I chose the image of the overgrown castle for this episode. So, do you have anything you could say about how this giant castle is in the middle of the Irish forest, Sophie?
Well, what I know is that place in Mayo that you posted that photo of this. You can put a link if you like, because maybe some people haven't seen it, because I think you didn't post it on the. Or did you post it on the sub? I'm not sure.
I posted it as thumbnail for this YouTube video.
Oh,
the video
yeah.
coming out right now. Yeah. But you can't see it while we're talking, so it's just the thumbnail in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, those are the typical English landlords' houses that they had built in Ireland during the English occupation of Ireland, and they had kept around trees and good lands, because the rest was slashed by the British to get wood to build the fleet, so they could have their wood here. So they destroyed the forest. At the same time, they killed all the wolves, and because they were they killed the wolves because they killed the forest, and also they went killing the wolves too. Sorry, that's my phone. So that's the story of that house is that, and it's overgrown now. I have no idea, actually. There's a lot of mysterious ruins here that are left there, and nobody knows why they're there at all. Like there's so many ruins from the famine here, and it's got all those ghost cottages everywhere, and you've got some castles like that are falling apart. It's like, looks really like a collapse, end of civilization in front of your eyes continuously. So I don't know the story of that place. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but how come that's the only forest in Ireland, or whatever you said? The only forest.
Not the only forest in Ireland, but there's a few pockets that are left in the north, a bit also about an hour from where I am, where my boy lives. There's remnants of the old forest in little pieces, but they are not. They are being separated. So, of course, like it's like the rest of Europe, you know, the forest has disappeared. It used to be covered with forest, and that's it, you know. And
so, is this where everybody will go with their axe to secure fuel for this winter in Ireland?
In this country, there's a tradition of liking to go and steal anything you can from the estate belonging to somebody rich, and particularly British. So there would be an old habit of people to just scavenge what they can when the landlords are not looking, you know. So that's still going on. So it would apply for wood. I've seen it done in properties around here. The holiday homes, people are not there. The locals go and get what they need, which is great, you know, in terms of, but there's not much wood here. People burn turf. They still do. They're cutting on it. And they burn sawdust. They make logs out of sawdust, and that's what a lot of people are burning that, because there's a few sawmills, you know. So the forest, for people going to get their own things in the woods here, you want to be close to the woods. Otherwise, you're in the middle. You've got agricultural places, or you've got places like where I live, which is bogs and lakes and rocks, and so there's moors, you know. So there's nothing that can grow, but there's few little things, you know. There's a few sheep and a lot of water, mostly water and rocks. Yeah.
I think I actually saw some farmers cutting the turf for the bogs when I was in Ireland. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, they still
20
do.
years
I
ago.
did it. I know how to do it. I've done it. I've saved turf for the last 20 years, and I stopped doing it now because I'm getting older. I know it's not so convenient, and it's just, you know, it was okay when you're living close to it and you just don't take too much. But when you want to start to cut a lot and you want to transport it, then you need a tractor, you need all sorts of things. So it becomes completely inefficient. So I gave up that. Yeah, the turf.
Isn't that how the Irish make whiskey and stuff? You burn that kind of turf or something? Is that totally
They
wrong?
burn the barrels. The barrels are with turf smoke or something. There's been fires, all right.
Okay.
Give a sort of flavor. They do that mostly in Scotland. It's more in Scotland that they do that. In the Highlands, it's not far from here, but it's more like they're more specialized in that sort of thing. Here, a lot of skills have been lost here in Ireland.
Yeah.
You know,
I actually
since because the famine and because it was only 100 and when was it? 100 years ago? Not even 200 years ago. 150 years ago. I'm getting mixed up with the dates. Yeah, 150 years ago. So, and also the status of being an occupied colony for so long. The population is very young in terms of skills and reorganization of skills and everything getting together, because they've been slaves for, wait a second, there were slaves for about 300 years, like here, really, like, you know, under the boot of the British Empire. So yeah, so now they have the independence only for about in the 1920s, you know. So
yeah, I actually grew up next to a long bog, a big bog like that, and we played around in that area as, you know, young boys, and they used to take out the turf in sort of long lanes, and then there was a higher part where they didn't take it out, where they could sort of walk it out or transport it out. And then there were also these little huts for drying the turf, I think, for every 100 meters or so. And it's exactly what you said, that it's a forgotten trade or a forgotten skill, how to use turf in that way.
Yeah,
And
but it's
I
a
think
survival one. It's a survival one. Because
Yeah.
if you think of it in that perspective, if there is a bog not too far, of course you're not going to burn the turf straight away. It's going to have to dry, and there's a whole cycle
Yeah.
to go with the year. You cut it in April, you dry it in the summer, and you put it away in October. So that's roughly, it follows the weather. But so it can be a survival thing if you're living near a bog. Can be good.
Yeah.
You know how to do it.
And I think at the same period in time, I've seen photographs from the lakes in the area, from the normal lakes. They would have horses and tractors and every kind of thing. Maybe not tractors 100 years ago, but cutting the ice, because ice blocks, huge blocks of ice, they're an important export article that they can export to London and stuff. For the first version of the refrigerator, they actually had a cupboard with a big block of ice, keeping all the food cold, and that ice was cut sort of in Scandinavia and Scotland and whatever, and transported down to Germany and Holland and England. So that's kind of things people did 100 years ago.
And would you use the ice like that now in Greenland? Would some people think of doing that, like, for themselves, or do they use all electricity for fridges and stuff like that?
Well, I'm pretty sure that in the far north and in the sort of smaller villages, people use either they use sort of cellars in the land for keeping things cool. A sort of basement inside the permafrost. They used to use that in Norway as well. But the big cities, or big, the relatively big cities in Greenland, they have top modern electricity hydro power stations today.
But I was wondering, like, from the point of view of the people in the north, or people very remote, people from the living traditionally, or were they well, I don't know, when did they become not really hunter-gatherers and start to preserve their food, like you were saying, in permafrost? Because it's interesting. Would they do that certain time of year, or would they do that all the time? I wonder. And when?
You mean hunting?
I don't know.
Hunting and fishing?
Well, you see, the people in the far north, they're mostly on the move. A lot of them follow herds and stuff like that. So when did they start preserving food? When did they start to settle?
In Greenland, you're
Yeah,
talking about now, right?
yeah.
No, it's like it's been since the Danish colonization in the 1700s, I think. It's been Danish policy to actually encourage hunting and fishing for exports, and for point one for exports and stuff, to sort of make it sufficient, self-reliant with resources and money and stuff, and also point to keep the traditions, because the Danish, they didn't really want to change everything in Greenland. They wanted some things to stay the same, I guess, which is good. Okay, I guess one of the main things that the colonizers, or the Danish, the kind colonizers, perhaps, I don't know, have done, is to centralize a bit, to make the settlement a little more concentrated in not quite as many different points, because the distances are very, very vast in Greenland. So in some cases they forced hunters and gatherers to move into the city, which is sociologically bad. Yeah, but I don't think they could have had any other civilized colonizers who would have been very much better. I think it's kind of a soft colony power. from what I gather from documentaries and stuff on the TV.
Can you repeat this, please, Torstein? There was a cut for me in the sound. Can you?
Oh, everything. Oh dear. I think
The
I
last
just
few,
answered
the
it.
last no, when you talked about the Danish occupation and stuff, and then my sound got cut off.
Yeah, I was just trying to make the point that according to recent documentaries and stuff about the time, it seems that the Danish overlords or colonizers were not the worst you could imagine in the world. If they were going to be colonized by somebody from Europe or America, I think maybe the Danish were the softest or the mildest or the easiest colonizers to have for Greenland. That's just my impression. I don't know.
And I bulge in there because I just got a message on my phone earlier, and I'm just checking it and it shows that Cornfed is saying he's blocked by a password request. He can't come in. So you know.
He just has to ask to come in, and then we will hear the knocking sound.
Okay, I'll
will
tell
let
him
him in.
that.
Bob, you there?
I'm there. Yeah.
How's situation in London? Tell us about your place.
There's no situation in London, is there? There's nothing going on. Everything is normal. Everything is fine. There's nothing to see. Don't worry. We'll be right back after these messages. But Wilco died. That's slightly sad, but he was kept alive artificially by civilization, I suppose. But no, yeah, there's no. I don't know. I think like the political situation in the UK has sort of died, in the sense that I don't know. There's a few strikes going on and stuff, but they seem to managing to. Is it the football they're doing or something? They're managing not to be making such a hoo-ha at the moment. So I don't know if this is a precursor to some sort of riots or whatever. But yeah, no, it's like there's a sort of lull in the UK at the moment. The post is going on strike. The nurse. Well, no, wait a minute. What am I thinking? The nurses are going to go on strike, which I think is a vital political move, because I think when the this sort of medical personnel. I don't know if any, whatever Inish can maybe testify or anybody else. There's a sort of sense that by choosing to become a healthcare provider, you're kind of in a state of presumed slavery, and even to some extent, like the Royal Mail staff, the post people, having a bunch of strikes at the moment, as well as the train people, and some of the response from like the public has been, oh, they're ruining Christmas for everyone because we've got to buy our presents and have them sent to people, and the Christmas cards and all this consumerist shit is going on, and yeah, I guess people feel aggrieved. Why are these people ruining Christmas by not allowing the post to go through? And my view on that is that you sort of expect these people to slave away delivering your stupid knickknacks and pointless cards and greetings and all this shit, and despite the fact that the people aren't being paid properly or whatever, they're suffering from bad conditions at work, or privatizations and whatever have facilitated the sort of robbery, which again, any of us here, I think this is all falling apart in due course anyway, but the idea that maybe there's some area of public life where somebody is protesting the circumstances, albeit not the right circumstances in the ideal way, but they are sort of protesting their abuse. And the response is still, oh, well, if the nurses go on strike, how are people going to get their cancer medicine? If the postmen go on strike, how are people going to get their Christmas gifts? And yeah, I think there's something potentially interesting. It strikes me with the Just Stop Oil people, which again, all of that sort of vanished as well from the headlines. But you know, they're you've got this thing where, you know, people are reacting negatively to any kind of protest, and there's some sort of a assumption where somehow the people driving to work, the people sending Christmas presents, the people getting cancer treatment, they're somehow entitled to all of these things. And maybe there's something interesting about a tendency to industrial action or something like that, which might be an opportunity to highlight the fact that people aren't entitled to these things. Like, you're not entitled to medical care to the extent that you can treat nurses like a slave. You're not entitled to post, and you're not entitled to use the M25. It's not something you should be allowed to take for granted, I guess. So yeah, but again, we're nowhere near what I perceive like in Holland and France, where they have lots of protests and stuff. I don't know. The Irish are also a bit passive, aren't they? They're not given to protesting. Do you have protests in Greenland, Torstein? Like, can you protest about not having enough snow or something? Not enough seals?
We are going to light the Christmas tree in one of the squares, or more like a lawn or something, a bog, later this week. I think that's about it. So it's pretty happy and snowy up here.
All right, no one's setting fire to the Christmas tree with a Molotov cocktail then.
I don't think it would catch fire because it's so cold. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, God. That's not good, is it? How are you going to have a revolution in Greenland? Well, there's not going to be one then, is there? Unless you get a flamethrower or something. Not that I'm only saying that as a joke, by the way, to the MI5, whatever.
Well, it's kind of
are we allowed to make jokes about flamethrowers?
Yeah, it's kind of one of the most ecological and maybe equal states in the world. So I don't think. I think if you are a revolutionary up here, you will go down to Denmark and try to stir up some shit down there, I think.
All right. Yeah. What is there potential for revolution in Denmark? I don't know if they. I don't know anything about Denmark actually. But
I think one of your poets said there was something rotten in Denmark, so I think that's still valid.
Yeah, that was an old tub of hummus I left in the fridge, maybe.
Do you know what I was thinking, guys, when you were talking, Bob, about entitlement? And this entitlement that you talk about, I'm kind of reflecting on where it's coming from, and it reminds me of a meeting we had years ago, I think, with you about this this assumption that is very similar to what you see in a prison yard, basically, or in a jail. This sort of these little privileges and little entitlements, you know. And I was interested about what you were saying about, you know, what do these people think, you know, what are we entitled to? That means that your mommy state, that means that you want your mommy daddy state to do everything for you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of true. And that, you know, the weight of industrial civilization again, because you know, again, there's this, and I feel scared about articulating this sort of idea, because there is you know, there's a sort of, I want to say understandable, there's a backlash against any suggestion that we're not entitled, for instance, to industrial civilization insofar as it can provide unlimited healthcare. And someone like Derek Jensen, sorry to bring him up, will sort of go, oh yeah, I understand that in the absence of civilization, I would be dead because I have whatever health condition and I rely on medication and blah, 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 and I drop dead. And Max Wilber, I think, has said the same. So that, you know, the people who've really thought about this shit have brought this up, of sort of understanding this thing of like, when you're speaking about civilization having to be changed or just done away with, or industrial civilization, whatever it is, might need to be done away with, you are sort of recognizing that some of the benefits of civilization that we take for granted will not be. So in the UK, people are learning, I guess, on the fringes of what this is going to be like insofar as the medical free medical system that we've had here is now pretty much in sort of, I guess, at the end of the beginning of the real deterioration, in the sense that most people are starting to recognize that you can't access hospitals, you can't access general medicine, a GP, you can't get an ambulance in the sense that we used to be able to. And so a lot of these things have been eroded, and it's a sort of boiling frog scenario where some of the frogs are starting to realize that the water's getting hot. But and there's someone like me comes along and says, oh well, we've got to get rid of this whole fucking industrial civilization thing anyway. And then everyone goes, oh, so I'm disabled and I need to drive around in one of these electric buggies. I need bone marrow transplant next month. Here's a small child with cancer. There's people with disabilities and other woeful conditions, and this sort of the anti-civilization or the degrowth narrative is sort of implicitly saying, oh fuck you, you can go and die if you're one of the people who depends on technology to survive. And I feel slightly uncomfortable being in the position where I'm sort of saying that, and I don't really have to contend with those issues myself right now, but I am sort of aware of the fact that time will come to have to contend with those things. And it doesn't matter how many times you read Ivan Illich and think about the problems that's caused by modern medicine. Once people are in that frame of mind that they depend on it, it's kind of difficult to to kind of even have a conversation about that with people without being accused of being a sort of Mengele character or whatever, or sort of
I think people presume very fast that outside modern medicine, outside this industrialized civilization medicine, it's death, it's terrible, we're all going to die.
We're all just going to drop dead.
This is not true, you see, but there is this kind of idea floating around. Incidentally, when a few days ago, a friend of mine was visiting and she said, I'm going to show you a strange movie. I said, okay, what's that? And it's called Silent Night. And it's about families getting together at Christmas. But the thing is that the Russians are throwing a poisonous gas that's going to kill everyone on that Christmas. And everybody's been given a pill that they can take to die without suffering, because the gas has been described as a terrible thing that makes you have seizures and then bleed and everything. So, and I won't tell you the end because I would spoil the story, but it is a reflection on what you're saying. You can present something as a terrible thing, or you could just say, well, you're going to have to do away with it and you're going to have to try something else, because another approach to living and another approach to everything. I think people are made very scared of, it's like our previous 2 years of craziness there with the hammering down of the pharmaceutical and everything. It's the same thing, the fear. I don't think we're going to stop talking about COVID now, because it might go, it's still very sensitive on YouTube, so we might as well not go there. What do you think?
Also, Bob,
I don't know.
I think one of the things about the collapse of the NHS, or the health system in Britain, is that in normal days, in normal decades, normal centuries, the other party, let's say Labour, when there is a conservative government, then Labour would seize the moment and sort of gather all the votes and support of those people who are not happy about NHS collapsing, But then, because we live in the postmodern collapsing world, of course, there is always a backstory where Labour were the ones who actually started the collapse, the planned collapse
Oh,
of
yes,
the
absolutely.
NHS or whatever. So it's like it's like totally. Imagine if you're young today and you see the Conservatives wrecking the NHS, and you've never experienced in your life Labour picking up the slack, or Labour sort of exploiting the fact that they are destroying it. So maybe we could fix it. You know, it's totally crazy if you're a young person today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, it's a very, very good and very pertinent point, because it's one of the things that I bring up all the time in conversations with people when I'm trying to put across the view that, like, there is no agency, the public has no agency in the way society is run. And again, I'll sort of do that in the context of when I talk to, and it's like when I talk to people who I think have got at least some brain cells, and who seem sort of switched on, but then when you talk about a collapse scenario and the death of the ecosystem and all these horrific things, they just can't absorb it, and they'll go. I don't know if you watch that bloody Sabine Hossenfelder, and she's made a bunch of videos recently touting nuclear, and it's all very snide. And you've got this sort of character who's like, all like, I am the professor of the objective science, and all this like, I'm not just a, I don't know. It's a sort of and again, same, Monbiot and all these characters who are sort of providing a platform, or providing a sort of space for people to be. I have some German blood, actually. Thank you very much for your compliments. There's these. What am I trying to say? Basically, you don't need a lot to help people into a state of just complete denial of any sort of scenario. So with the NHS in particular, people since at least the Labour government, which is the last, the Tony Blair genocidal maniac government as was, they were doing stuff that would lead to the sort of privatisation and destruction of the health system. And at the time, there was a couple of like stand-up comedians and very out there lefty political campaigners or whatever were talking about this, and the stock response from British people is, no, that can't be happening, because the public wouldn't allow, they wouldn't allow the NHS to be destroyed, right? And you'd say, well, you are allowing the NHS to be destroyed. Look, this is happening. Here's the evidence. And people go, oh, no, the public won't allow that to happen, so it's not going to happen. And then from the Labour Party, they introduced the PFI, private investment, basically, which was something that people at the time said, yes, this is opening for privatisation. And what the Labour Party does is they invest, they cut waiting lists, they improve services, but they also do a bunch of stuff in the background that's sort of setting up the Tories to do whatever nasty thing, because that's the game, isn't it? Good cop, bad cop. And over the however many years, and since the Tory party came into power, there was more and more evidence that the NHS is going to be privatised, and that we're going to end up with an American health system. And the response from the general public, again, is the public won't allow the NHS to be privatised. And you say to people, well, what is the mechanism for the public to not allow, like, what power or even influence does the public, if there is such a thing, even have? And then people just repeat this thing, oh, they won't allow, the public won't allow. And when you ask people what the mechanism is, they can't answer. And you say, as far as I can tell, I'm living in an authoritarian system, because there are no mechanisms that anybody can point to change the way society operates. And then people might say general election. And at this point, even the straight people kind of realize that's not a mechanism for change. And the last time was when, Corbyn went to try and become the prime minister, and he even went on telly with the document saying, I've got the document in my hand showing how there's a plan to privatize the health system, and so on and so forth. And that was like a bunch of deep state stuff was done, and they got rid of him. Which again, I'm not labouring under a terrible pun there. I'm not labouring under the misapprehension that Corbyn would have been able to do anything. And Corbyn is, was just a sort of nice man with a cardigan, really, and pretty clueless about most things. So I don't think that would have really made a change. But at least there was like a proposition put to the general public that you could choose something a bit different, and they decided not to go with that. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling a lot, but the point I'm trying to make is that if you observe the public's response, for instance, to this issue of the NHS being destroyed, which is the thing that the public would never allow to be destroyed, and the thing that British people are more proud of than anything else, and the reality is you could just fucking ruin the whole thing in front of people's faces. You can wave documents. You can bring out a parade of medical practitioners, people working in the NHS, who will tell you all about how it's been privatized and how you're going to lose access to healthcare. You can shut down hospitals. You can make it impossible to get an appointment, and people will still not be willing to grasp the reality of the situation. And I'm reasonably confident that there'll be a point at which that you literally can't get anything at all from the health system, and people will still deny that this is going on. Now, personally, I'm not that bothered about the NHS. I'd rather not have any dealings with them. That my encounters with mainstream medicine have not been positive by and large. So I'm going to largely ignore them, and they're ignoring me. But
yeah, and not in the mindset, I believe, or I guess that, I'm doomed. Well, we are, but I mean, without Western medicine, you see, there's a good, if you get out of it, the best thing to do. I mean, in my opinion, that's what I'm doing. And I was a doctor, so, and I still use some of that, way of thinking for certain diagnoses and stuff. But I've pulled out of it completely, and lots of people around me, and even my family. But you prepare yourself to do without it. That's the way we're doing it, more than just saying, "Oh, it's all shit." It's not like that. It's just what you're going to, what's falling. Emergency care, as you said, ambulances, access to doctors. Well, you're just gonna have to get more self-sufficient in that line.
You're going to need some pain-killing plants, isn't it? You're going to need some.
Well, yeah, but you can connect with all sorts of different remedies that can be found in nature. Of course, there's some fantastic painkillers that can grow anywhere and that you can have in plants. But there's all sorts of other ways and different ways of treating diseases that have been used for thousands and thousands of years, and they're numerous. It depends on where you are and what's your culture, what's your climate. But there's people who have experience, and and we have to take risks.
I love what. Oh, go ahead, A.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, so sorry. Thank you, though. Bob raises so many great points. That's like going south. Asked about news from America, and maybe there's a little, but just picking up on what Bob said. I just love English people recoiling at the horror of the American healthcare system. Oh my gosh, it's really terrible, though. That's for sure.
It is one of the most horrific things to consider, the American.
Oh yeah,
we're going there. This is the thing. We are going there. But
as the resources draw down, I think that there are going to be a lot of advanced civilizations going there. I just think it's notable. Every American doctor wears a tie. And if you watch the movies and kind of speak to the doctors, they will say, after all, it is a business. That is the point of it. And I think that there's so much richness out of your comments there. I think there's just so much that could be said. In America anyway, it's really apparent that the healthcare system creates a lot of the problems that, of course, it pays itself to create and then pays itself to solve again. Everything from cavities and dental work to unnecessary procedures and superfluous procedures. It's incredible how much damage the thing creates, which then, of course, they get you coming and going. They turn around and sell you the solution as well. Not that it's all bad, but you will pay for it. That's for sure. But it's interesting to me, you said the way that the British public reacts, and it's just kind of, yeah, those Hausfelder videos they've jumped the shark, as we say in the US anyway, in my view. But when you think about, the way the public reacts, I just wonder through what intermediary. We've had a roiling debate, since Bill Clinton was president in the United States about the nature of healthcare in our country. And, there are all these people who ascribe or allege what the public says, but you'll note that they are the conveyors of that information. And typically they are part of that corporate class themselves. So when they say what the public is saying, they're creating it as much as they are relaying it. And I think that that's an interesting dynamic too. But, I'll shut up now. I just think there's so much that could be said about your comments there. Good stuff.
I mean, yeah, it's just, yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, you in America, you've got this thing where American people will defend the way the healthcare system works because they believe it gives them some sort of choice or whatever.
Only the foolish or
Yeah.
the ones making money from it.
But the British public is 100% on that level, or at least 99%. And it's just like because they've got the thing bearing down on them and they won't see it.
Well, that's quite a propaganda coup.
It's amazing, yeah. Well, I take that back actually, because I think it's like the actual job of society, since the Industrial Revolution has been, to control the perception of the public. And so I guess they're quite good at it by now. But yeah, we are, we're dumb, aren't we? We're kept very stupid. Yeah, did you want to I'm hogging the mic here. Did you want to throw something in from the USanian perspective?
Well, yeah, and just personal, my personal experience. I grew up in Asia, and doctors were held in high regard, probably vying for the position of the Catholic priest. So they're put on a pedestal. But coming to America, I was warned that the healthcare system was very expensive, and I find myself, like I'm of that age where I'm trying to plan for retirement, and I read all these articles that say that for a couple, 65 years old and above, one needs, this was like maybe 5 years ago, $250,000 just to make sure that they would have adequate health care. So, who, I mean, and we are kind of scared about that because you're always thinking, well, I'll never make that, so I'll just keep working. But in this past 2 years, with the lockdown and the pandemic, I've seen so much how doctors seem to be, like Cornfed said, beholden to interests of, pharma companies. It's a business, and you spend so little time with a doctor, like they're always in a hurry. And even now, I can't. I couldn't get a primary care physician that I wanted. Somebody was just assigned to me. Like, I have no idea who this doctor is. And honestly, in the last 2 years, I have cultivated a fear of actually going into the medical system, because of all just, like everything that has transpired. Like, can you really trust that your doctors have your best interests at heart? I'm not so sure about that now. So that's what I have to say from a personal standpoint.
Yeah,
And I
I
would
feel
just-
the same. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in and support that. It's, just over my relatively short life, it's just been amazing to see the way billing and insurance has got their hooks into the nurses and doctors. Doctors now are on the order of 10-minute meetings with patients, and all the vitals are collected in advance. But each doctor or nurse, travels around the hospital with them with a robot. It's almost like a dolly looking thing that measures and records every moment of their activity to squeeze it for as much productivity and billing as they can get. It's quite a machine.
I was also, thanks for that. I was also I'm very impressed that Inish has a combination of the medical scientific background, but also knows about the natural herbs or what remedies might be available. Because yeah, I agree with whoever said that. I think it was Cornfed that like um, the collapse of civilization um, will definitely limit our access to medical professionals, which might be a blessing in one sense, but I've been thinking myself that it would be good to take like EMT classes or just basic first aid or like study herbs and stuff like that. So we'll just have to kind of build networks of tapping into the skills of neighbors and friends who have skills that can help us when we come to the point that we need medical help.
Yeah, absolutely. This is very, very important. But it's something that everybody should do. You see, I'm doing it. I've got an advantage because I'm leaning on hundreds of years of medical descriptions of diseases. So I've learned that. At least that was good. I learned in medical school describing this and that is kind of useful, in case you face it. But it doesn't mean that the treatment that modern medicine is doing for these conditions is going to make it better or not. It's actually making it worse at the moment for most things. So you have to, you suddenly have to. I don't trust me for myself, for my family. I don't trust them going into the system. I really don't. So I'm the same as you, and I know it from the inside. You're traveling in a maze there. If you don't know, if you're not from that place, you just try to get as away from it as possible without, throwing the glove and saying, well, you have appendix. Sometimes, if you can still have it taken out, you could save your life or something like that, but other than fixing fractures and acute surgery maybe and certain things like that, I don't even do any follow-up with them. Nothing of the likes of checkups and all that, which is just a waiting room for more extravaganza and health-related investigations and other things that will anyway find out that you have something, because you have something. Because especially if you're aging and it's you're aging, so your heart is aging, your blood pressure, you're aging, but it's not, it's turned into a disease, so there's so much of that to brush away, to find the people who are sincere and who can see clearly, and most of them are hostages. So it's neighborhood and reading a lot, finding how people managed a long time ago. But even though there is people now who know, there's good books that can teach you that. But I think a course in emergency aid is good if it's done, in the way that you're not relying on a hospital straight away after, you see, because most emergency care things are made to save people's life, all right, but then there's no it's complicated to explain that to non-medics, but there's a lot of things that you can do with, you need to, for example, most emergency courses advocate the use of a defibrillator. Well, I mean, you're talking about, a machine that's worth €1,000 or that is totally depending on our technology. So there's other approaches also to health and dying. There's no recipe. You're going to have to find your own.
I know I missed some of this, but it's just amazing to me to look at the history of modern medicine and its roots in war and battle. But I don't think that's the main thing. There's just so much capitalist influence, at least in the U.S., on the nature of medicine and its role. But I think that learning how to grow things, I just really am worried about the day when we have no longer have access to antibiotics, that's going to be big trouble. And, I hope that herbalism and things like that can help. But, as I just look about America, the healthcare industry is built to compensate for the standard American diet and the nature of American health. And that is an industry just designed to predate and extract from people as well. It's just incredible. But, the understanding of nutrition is so twisted. But I think, for me anyway, it's just really important right now to try to be as healthy as possible, both in diet and activity, because certainly, these things are not secure.
I've just seen Mike on the stream. That's good to know.
Yeah, isn't the thing about nutrition just that anything that comes in a packet is bad, and there's a lot of distortion over whether you should eat carbohydrates or fat or protein or animals or not eat animals. But yeah, I think it's just like the fact that if someone else has made it and put it in a vacuum pack, then it's bad.
I have my own personal, axe to grind on all this stuff. But yeah, I really do think staying away from processed food as much as you can is really important. Looking at whole ingredients. But also, at least in the US, it's breathtaking how nutritionally depleted and devoid even the food you get at the grocery store, even the organic food. Its nutrient densities are just shockingly low. And then my favorite subject regarding nutrition is, I personally don't believe, just related to my engineering and thermodynamic experience, I don't think the field of nutrition has caught up to the nature of macronutrients and how starches and sugars and fats are different to your body and how your body accesses and metabolizes that energy. And here in the US, everybody craves some kind of starch or sugar every 4 hours. And, if you chain people to that kind of diet, like cornflakes and donuts, that has long-term implications over the lifespan of people, including diabetes, which we have through the roof, and heart disease, which we just have in spades. I think that there's a kind of a reckoning about the thermodynamic nature of macronutrients that nutrition and medicine has yet to kind of catch on to, which is just my favorite hobby horse, but that's a short treatment. Again, I just think gardening is so much more important because you can get, food that is so much more dense in vitamin nutrients.
Yeah, I think the ground or whatever, the soil doesn't have the nutrients in it now, does it?
Not with the kind of modern factory farming. Most of the soils in the US anyway are just basically sponges for petrochemical fertilizer.
Well, if it's coming from nutrient depleted soils, it's like the story you need to eat 3 potatoes for one that would come from a good soil, So you imagine you multiply by 3 the amount of calories and starch that you don't need just in order to get those nutrients. You see, it's crazy. That explains the obesity and the diabetes crisis mostly. The lack of nutrients.
Yeah, they talk about people in the US who are walking around completely obese but nutritionally deficient, which is such an irony, But there's another problem that's occurring more and more too, and this is just such a great example. But everyone flocks to brown rice, which is great. It's fantastic stuff. But what's happening is, as cotton growers have depleted soils around the world in major cotton growing regions, they've also doused those cotton crops with with arsenic pesticides. And so when those cotton crops can no longer extract a decent yield of cotton, of course, the industry moves on to richer soils. And then what replaces those fields, what replaces cotton in those fields so often is brown rice. And so now we have this massive problem with, children and youngsters being fed brown rice cereals that are dangerously high in arsenic. So there's a similar problem there. Again, it's just kind of the industrial nature of land use.
Sorry, so the brown rice that I've been eating to give me a good shit is actually killing me now?
You'll probably be fine. As an adult male, you're probably okay. I mean, we're just chock so full of toxins, it's mind-boggling. But
I'm resilient to toxins already, in other words.
yeah, it's probably the collapse that'll get you, Bob.
All right, that's all right then. I can keep
Yeah.
with the brown rice then.
If you
Yeah, so and we've all got plastic in us as well, isn't it? I think I said that last time. But yeah, so in theory, you could like minimize the minimize the impact of, or minimize the need for healthcare if you have better nutrition, but everything that you eat is now poisoned. And yeah, but everything will be fine if we can just build another 500 nuclear reactors a year.
Oh yeah, that'll solve it.
According
Yeah,
to
we'll just continue finding countries to bomb with, depleted uranium rounds like, the US did in Iraq. That's how we'll dispose of it too. Or the Navajo Nation in the US, which is crazy.
Yeah, so I mean I was reading actually about the well, I can't remember where I read that now. There's something that sorry, it's a complete tangent, but apparently the US's genocide of the native people was so thorough. It was like one of the most like total genocidal genocides ever done. And where was I reading this about the sort of genetic makeup of South America? How Mexico down, there's like quite a mixture of original inhabitants and Europeans, and in America, like there's no genetic trace in the average, non-native American of the natives at all. But sorry, that's completely tangential. Just on the basis of like the Americans being pretty brutal. But yeah. Sorry, I drifted off there. That's almost like I had a bifter or something before.
There's some talk of how, Hitler's Germany kind of studied the US, reservation system and used it as a sort of model. But, yeah, it's absolutely terrible. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I think they did. They got, didn't they? Because they got their advertising and their propaganda from, well, sort of from America, wasn't it? Because it was the famous story of it being whatever Freud's nephew introducing PR, and then Goebbels got into that from that. So I suppose that's sort of Germany bouncing back on itself.
I'm in an area of the U.S. where Native American schools were a big deal. And, there's been quite a bit of news in Canada about the reckoning of Native American schools and their role in the genocide, north of the U.S. Here in the U.S., of course, we've yet to have that kind of social reckoning. But yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah, because the like my pet topic with the old Palestine thing, when you say that you'd support, handing back Palestine to its original inhabitants, they'll retort that, oh, so are you saying they should hand back America to its original inhabitants? And obviously the answer would be yes.
Yeah, it'd be hard to imagine anyone could.
Sorry, I lost the end of your sentence there.
Cornfed, you are muted.
Oh yeah, I agree. It'd probably be better. Is all I'm saying. It's hard to imagine anyone could screw it up as bad as the Americans have. Better off in the hands of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
I see the stream conversation going on the screen, going south. Thank you for putting it up. So to see some people we know who have joined in, it's nice. And some we don't, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. It's the same anyway. So apart from the subject of, well, no, not apart, but on the subject of medicine, I agree with you, Bob, that it's in shambles anyway, and it was written in it's in shambles in Ireland too. It's all over, but there is a big denial of that too. You know, people continue to crowd emergency rooms and aggravate the situation because they don't want to see that is what is happening. They don't want to become more resilient and more responsible for what they have and how they live, and so it's going to become much worse. People are panicking. There's really the hospital situation, and maybe for the very rich. I don't know. In England, everybody has healthcare, but the private system has invaded a public system like the NHS. But in Ireland, there's double standards: private hospitals, public hospitals. You know, private waiting lists, public waiting lists, and the divide rich poor is enormous. I don't know about other parts of the world.
Can I jump in? Or things?
Hi, MD.
Hurry. Yeah, just on the healthcare thing. Well, probably my opinion is that hospitals are for sick people, so if you want to stay healthy, stay out of them. But I don't know, it's a phenomena that I've come across of late because I've been looking into more eating in, alternative ways, foraging, stuff like that. But, like when you have wild fruits and stuff in season, and I, particularly in the last couple of years, will eat them as much as possible. And no going so, but basically I think there's a real benefit, maybe because of the macronutrients and micronutrients thing from that, you're picking up a lot of nutrients that are in what's it called, ditches that are haven't been affected by or less affected by industrial agriculture. They've more mycelium and stuff. So you're probably going to that's probably a big might be a big help to your health.
Oh yeah, that's right. If you have access to soil that's not being depleted, that's where you'll have the most nutrients. But it's a privilege to be close to places like that.
Yeah, I was thinking more like blackberries in the autumn, crab apples, stuff like that. When you see them, just pick some and eat some. And
oh yeah,
I found the last couple of years since I started doing that a lot more, because I used to do it as a child. But now that I start doing it again, my health is definitely improved from it.
Well, sure, I know. I'm doing it this nearly all year round when I can, except maybe soon because this time of year there'll be less. But there's always something you can find to add to what you used to eat. You don't have to rely on it so much now, because if you have other foods, but it's a good habit to get it into your, even if you have access to clean seaweed and stuff to chew on and things like that. They've got loads of good things. When you look at documentaries on people who live in tribes far away or remote places, you see they're often chewing at sticks and leaves and stuff. They're always kind of getting a little bit out of the. I've noticed that. I don't know if you have.
I just can I pick up on this point? MD just said something that struck me, that he perceives improvement in his health after eating wild food, basically. Is that right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, for sure.
I'd be fascinated to, yeah, I don't know how I'd even notice something about myself in that sense. I mean, as in, do you have to eat quite a lot of wild berries or something to notice a difference? Or
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, one thing that's there now at the moment is I was just looking for the name of it, but it's actually the strawberry tree, which I didn't really know much about until recently, until I read a book about trees by Diane Beresford something. But basically, that's something that I'm going to at the moment. But yeah, I think like I don't get colds and flus really anymore. You know, these light ailments. I tend to have a high resistance to the cold. You know, yeah, I definitely perceive that I feel better. Even, but it's not a full time occupation. You know what I mean? It's still buying, normal fresh fruit and vegetables in the market, cooking that with meat and potatoes or rice. Maybe even brown rice, like you said earlier, but normally white rice.
yeah, that's interesting.
But you know, I have noticed that at my age too, when I started to have access to much more, well, especially since I stopped working. So I was really all the time hands-on the soil and stuff around me. That I was just thinking about it not long ago. My resistance to little infections has completely changed, because I used, when you cut your hand, I'm often cutting my hands or hurting myself with scratching and thorns and stuff. So I remember that years ago I could get sometimes problems, get infected, blah, blah. Now it heals really, really fast. And so I know that there's something with the immune system that is it's probably what you're saying, MD. There is something I don't even want to go into scientific explanations of all this, because it's boring and it's just, everybody can find that on the internet, but it's not that the only explanation, I think. But the effect is, I can bear testimony to that with me too. And things that would have really got infected years ago, I've noticed now, after a few days, just a bit clean and stuff, I don't get it anymore. I don't get any more infections.
Hi. I read, this is many years ago, that broccoli is antiviral, antibacterial, and anti-cancer. And I've eaten it and it's helped a lot. So
Yeah, I think actually there's more to it than that. Actually, I've picked up on, I have a lot of books here, but there was this book by Tony Wright, Return to the Brain of Eden, about restoring the connection between neurochemistry and consciousness. But also in that book, it like basically it describes about eating the fruits, like things like apples. But when you eat them directly off the tree, you get a lot of whatever's on the skin that you haven't washed off. And so part of it is not just, it's like eating it out there in the nature, unwashed. Obviously you try to pick clean ones, and you know that could give you the full package. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. That's why I was telling you that it's better to eat outside and to pick and eat if you want to get some really nutrient-rich food. It's the way to do it, is to eat it straight, pluck it off. And if you look at the animals, that's how they eat most of their vegetables. So cooking them and freezing them and all that, it can be, but it's not the same. It's definitely not the same.
Was that the Return to the Brain of Eden? Is that something where the guy's more or less saying that if you were in the olden days living on fruit, you were more or less living in a sort of weird tripped out reality where your left and right brains were interacting with each other in a way that they don't now, something like that? Am I thinking of the right guy?
Yeah. Like I haven't read that book in a long time, but basically, we're going back to global traditions of an earthly paradise lost and of humanity's degeneration from original state of perpetual joy, wonder and joy. That's written on the back of it. So
yeah, I remember watching a load of videos, like talks that guy did. Brilliant, very fascinating stuff. It was like all that was missing was like a bit of trepanning.
Yeah, Tony Wright is the author. Return to the Brain of Eden.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, if you are constantly looking for your food outside and you're just looking out at the seasons and the roots and the fruit and all that, you're having a great life. So why would you get sick anyway? Because that's also, it's the way of living too that brings you to that sort of eating. Do you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah.
Something we've lost in the last 100 to 50 years, depending on where you live.
Yeah, but look at if you look at children, when they're let wild and there's loads of fruit or stuff that they can, the kids still have it, and we have it too. Like, if I never preserve my strawberries because I eat them all when I'm in the garden because I just love them when I eat them, and I can't understand the jam thing and the making cakes and stuff like that. I just have to just stuff myself with them when they're ready. I don't know, something in me knows that that's the way to eat them. Society tells you have to preserve, and no.
Yeah, what you're saying is really key, Anish. I mean, I remember the first time I ate an ear of corn straight from the stalk, and I feel like it changed my life. It's just totally different and so much more rich. But the way people live
is that why you call corn fed?
That's a good point. No, frankly, but I should. But what you're saying about that way of life is so key. I nerd out on the science. It's my favorite. So I don't mean to make anyone's eyes glaze over, but the whole COVID thing has kind of reinforced to people how important vitamin D is. And of course, being outside and getting in the sun is how your body manufactures that vitamin D. By being outside and being active, revving up your metabolism and doing physical activity, that dramatically improves your immune system. It is a whole way of life. It's ideally, it's not just what you eat, as you were saying.
But I suppose there will be times. Yeah, go on.
You go ahead, please.
Yeah, I suppose there will be times where you're going to need some type of medical intervention. I mean, certain things will happen, people over time, whether accident or otherwise. I mean, I don't know, Inishman, you said before about that hospital originated, it's a word originating from the Gaelic Druids in Ireland, who used to have quite a good field medicine background back in the day when the Druids were still allowed. That, so the whole thing that was there, maybe, whether it's 500 years ago or how long since society got contaminated by the modern industrial civilization, that has to somehow grow back again. And we're going to have, between the GIC collapse and that being relearned, there could be a few painful years in the meantime.
I think we can't go back to the Druids because you can't go back to the past. I think the idea of the Druids embodies the idea of a healer who knows the plants, but also is a shaman, and is in contact with a spirit world of a kind. So, but you can explore that nowadays with what we know and what we've had and what's left of this, because you can't dismiss everything out of this this gigantic scientific experiment there in medicine. But there's still people who are gifted for healing, and they'll be there. You'll always find midwives and nurses and good people to set bones and people who are good at sewing up and pulling teeth, and because it'll have to happen. It might not be like it was in the past. It might be a patchwork of of remnants of our time, and yes, some druidic elements in it. Have you noticed actually, MD, that in Ireland there's still a lot of people who use old medicines like that. There's still a lot of quacks and healers and people that you know, in the community that you go to for this or that. Have you noticed that yourself? I know you're not from the same part of Ireland as I am. You're from more south, but it's not much different. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, the dependency on the modern industrial complex medicine is, you know, there's an over dependency on that too, just as in any Western nation. So I suppose my point is that there'll be we could, depending on how things shake out, I mean, we could be looking into a period, kind of a dark age, between things get reorganized for when the lights go out, you know what I mean? Because that's probably the first thing that's going to happen. The electricity will go out.
I'm really, you know, I think one of the first big things is antibiotics. You know, lack of access to those is going to be, it's going to sweep a lot of people away. But yeah, you know, among other reasons.
Yeah, but there'll be also a lot of people who will be spared the need to use antibiotics because there will be less contact between people if there is damage to the grid in terms of transport and infrastructure. So in terms of numbers, I don't think there will be as much need of antibiotics for, you know, but there will it's definitely a nice discovery. It probably existed under some other form a long time ago, but that's not that difficult to make without a lab. I know it might be take a little bit of a chemist and all sorts of different little things, but I've read that you can kind of make your own little, you know, it was discovered on cows, you know, that were growing this kind of penicillin, you know, it was growing this kind of green thing there that was growing on the milk. And, you know, there is ways of finding friends, you know, antibacterial friends like penicillin in the natural world, if, you know, if we're lucky to find them and look for them in the right place.
Yeah, you know, I've heard a little bit of Native American and Inuit, you know, procedures for creating funguses and molds that have anti-cancer and antimicrobial properties, but I really don't know much about that. It might be worth looking into.
Any news about the flipning?
Are you asking me about that?
I'm asking
Slow and steady, no doubt.
the group. No, because there was at last meeting, there was the subject was brought up, and it was left. I was going back and looking at old things about it, and you know, the debate we were having and talking about it and everything. So it was still on my mind. And when I say any news, is that a while ago when there was the sub called the Giant Reset, I think there was kind of Hugh was posting a lot about earthquakes and volcano activity in the world and saying that that could have been, but I wonder, is that, I don't know, do we have to be looking at signs of flippening? You know, I think it's just, well, come back to the idea that it's going to happen from one way or another, and we don't need to be looking for indications. That's why I was saying any news from the flippening, because it's like this thing hanging, but you know, but
I appreciated you sharing that Divine Beasts post in Weird Collapse on Reddit, and somebody dissented. I kind of commented hoping to get a good cross-examination of the issue, but I think they just deleted their comment instead of answering.
They said that we were a group, and that our leader thought he was an alien.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, that's the guys have just, you know, just looked over the sub and kind of. So I said, okay,
Well, that's easier. But yeah, you know, thinking about I think what DB said the idea that global warming may contribute to changes in the weight distribution of the Earth's crust, which could lead to that sort of thing, is really interesting. It all seems to me like just a meta crisis. We don't really have to bet which one's going to come in first, but we may see food shortages and abrupt weather changes and flippening all at the same time. They are related to some degree.
But on that, I mean, the best thing about for the tail event, like this is a tail event. I mean, Talib, Black Swan event. Effectively, there's not a lot you can do about it, so it's not really worth worrying about it, even though it's
Yeah.
an interesting topic actually. But the COP is going on at the moment, and I'm not seeing anything really in the news about updates on climate change, the rate of increase in carbon dioxide or temperature. Has anyone been hearing about that?
Yeah, my sense of COP was that the results were pretty disappointing, and so everyone who might comment is going to go home and sulk, and kind of be depressed for a while. But I don't know. I don't have the hard news.
Yeah, everybody in the environmentalist
People in COP
camp
are
have
going to
all
do
just said, fuck that for a game of soldiers. Yeah, it's beyond even a performative joke, isn't it, COP?
It's a mess.
Yes, as I was saying, all the people from the COP are gone to the World Cup. It's the same. You've got just a migration of events and people's attention too. So it's just gone into limbo, like it always does. Which is, the show. It's not even worth looking at any of the things they've decided. What do you think going south? Have you been following that? Hello, Toshti?
Going south is watching the football, maybe.
Or maybe
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not watching the football. I was getting my food out of the oven. So yeah,
oh,
I
sorry.
think now that we have both the Cup and the World Cup in November, maybe we should for the future make a huge Cup thing out of it and fly all the football fans down to the other side of the planet and also fly all the climate geeks and business people who wants to make themselves rich from the Green New Deal and just have them talking about climate in the morning and watch football in the afternoon. Is that a good idea? I don't know.
As long as we can get together a betting pool, I'm into it.
Yeah, maybe more seriously, I think the only big topic at the COP, from what I gather afterwards, is they wanted to get these reparations going, like get every nation on the planet fighting over who should pay who for who did what and in what century. So that sounds like, yeah, let's talk about that for 20 years until everything collapses. Nobody will ever pay anything, I think. Is that fair to say, Bob?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I say nobody will ever pay anyone for what they did to the climate
No.
a century ago or whatever. Is that
I
fair to say?
agree. Nobody will
Yeah.
pay. There won't be anybody left to pay shortly, I suppose. But
And
no, I
how
don't.
could you fairly compensate someone for destroying their mode of living? And like, would that money replace their food? That's absurd. It's just a sideshow.
Yeah, why would you even
Yeah,
believe that they
I
would
think it's
intend?
like a stalling tactic. Let's debate these useless things now, then we don't have to cut the emissions.
Yeah, look over there. Look over there. Look behind you. I mean, I was reading a long form sort of article about energy today, and it's something like 50% of the carbon we've burned has been since like 1990. Did you know that? So like in 1990s already, that they were well into talking about how fucked everything is, and I was quite surprised to realize that we've actually burned 50% of everything. Yeah, it's just so crazy. And yeah, I don't know. So yeah, the COP thing, and at least, I mean, again, I'm sorry to bring up my own bugbears all the time. It's a bit boring, but I'm obsessed with like flying being like the most evil thing anybody can do because it's so fucking pointless. And there's almost nobody, apart from Kevin Anderson, I think, who really talks about how ridiculous it is that people are flying to COP. And the only people who talk about that are like climate deniers, going, "Oh, these stupid people. Obviously, if they thought this was such a serious issue, they wouldn't all be flying around to their holiday in Egypt." But yeah, no, they're not going to pay, are they? It's like you're not gonna believe when the mugger tells you that they're going to compensate you for what they stole and for the trouble that they've caused as well. Well, yeah, the global dimming thing. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, how do you even communicate that idea though to the normies? Because you say, okay, well, we've got to stop burning fossil fuels, so that's all done with. No more McDonald's for you, mate. Oh, and by the way, when we do that, we're actually going to make the whole problem worse. And then you've got the geoengineering people coming in at that point, and they're going to make it worse as well. Yeah, everything is just going to be worse, isn't it? I think that we're looking at sort of like a frenzied slave program where Elon Musk one day turns up with a gun or whatever and forces all of us to become laborers in a sort of North Korea type scenario to build the 5,000 nuclear power plants that we need so that we can burn through whatever uranium is available to us in the next 5 to 10 years just to keep the air conditioning on in some billionaire's mansion for a bit, and then everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket, and we're going to have like a wipeout of 99% of the human population, and the people and animals that are left are going to have to contend with endless amounts of nuclear waste that Sabine Hossenfelder has assured everybody there's no big deal.
You've made a number of points, but just one thing about the reparations, doesn't it show how much people are tied into what Lord Hughes mentioned about the slave mentality, or into the plantation, where, okay, so their economy is affected by the current climate crisis. So then, because they don't have an income, they need to get reparations from the rich countries. But that just shows that they maintain, they're still within the plantation mentality. Anyone got anything to say on that?
Yeah, what have you got any view on how to maybe help people unpick the plantation, or is there a way of maybe publicizing or popularizing the idea of this plant, because it's a very strong notion and it's stuck with me. Yeah, can we do anything about it? Can we deplantationify or make people aware of this, Mick?
Can I just
Yeah.
respond to the previous question? I think maybe key to the problem of reparations is that, I think somebody brought it up already, but we need to sort of find out if money can ever replace what was done. And I think it's pretty fair to say in the climate chain of events, or the climate timeline, that paying somebody, some other country or continent, for something that you did to the atmosphere 100 years ago or 50 years ago, it makes no sense. It's like, oh yeah, we get this money and we can go on holiday in the Mediterranean using that money, but it just doesn't make any sense. And I think the only sense that could come out of that kind of discussion is more like, oh yeah, India didn't start polluting before 19 blah blah blah, so therefore they can be allowed to pollute a little bit more now, while other people have to stop completely. But I don't think the money reparation debate is fruitful in any way.
Yeah,
And
but
I would go ahead.
go on. No, go on, Cornfred.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just, and I think we're fast approaching a time when, visas and legal and appropriate migration is going to be way more valuable than money. Of course, people with money tend to find a way to the safer places, but, these reparations just kind of seem like a trap. Not that they aren't warranted, but it's also notable to me that that's where the focus of the conversation is, as opposed to doing anything about the problem itself. But people hoping for the money, that's a path to a dead end in my view. It's potential trouble.
Yeah, I agree too. I think it's better to look beyond the reparations thing about going back to what Lord you were saying about getting out of the plantation mentality. I mean, Bob was asking me the question about how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you publicize it? To be honest, I for me the best method is to live like you're outside the plantation yourself. That's you can't live everyone else's life. You got to live your own life. So you try to live your own life in the right way, and maybe that's the best way of showing others.
Does that require, in your view, a physical exit from the sort of lifestyle of a modern, urban person? I guess that's bringing up an old theme, but is there a metaphysical approach to that, or is there is that really a material action in your view?
Yeah. For me, I mean, I grew up on a farm. I became an engineer. I've lived in apartments and cities most of my life, and the aim, early next year is to be back on land, small house, something small, because it's very hard to get out of the economic, or what's it called, the capitalist mentality, which is the slave mentality, while you're still working and living in the system. And I know that's not possible for everyone, that type of radical change, but that's just one example of doing it. I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
a really big challenge, for some people to do it physically. But I just think it's notable that the creation of this capitalist mentality happens. It's an active process by the system. It's active, constant indoctrination. So yeah, I think that all that we're really left with is our personal breaking free from the plantation or the factory farm.
yeah, it's I guess from is it selfish or from a self-interested perspective, it would be I think it'd be beneficial to me to think about how, if you can't get out of your physical environment, what are other ways of doing that, of trying to, I guess, becoming conscious of the plantation. And even as I cogitate on the idea, and I think I'm aware, I allow for the possibility that I'm not aware. But yeah, how do you get rid of that slave mindset? And is it, does everyone have to follow MD to the countryside? And if we do, it might MD regret having encouraged us to do it if there's a bunch of fucking human beings?
Yes, but there'll be more fun that way. You see?
But Bob, I don't know the last time did I mention about if you're in a job, an initial thing is this new, and it was on the Times in the UK, I think, about quitting. I mean, you still get paid, but you do as little as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a very fortunate scenario where I kind of do it and doing that working for myself. So that's one area where I can, yeah, this is a kind of, but I feel like I'm, again, sorry to be hogging the mic again, but I feel like there's I'm in a slightly having my cake and eat it scenario, and throughout my life I've been very rebellious and not played the game, but yet I'm still sort of ensconced in the urban setting at least. So yeah, I guess, you know, there must be, yeah, the idea of like, I mean, I guess one, not from my individual perspective, I guess, but being in a money earning scenario in the more coercive type, doing it in that sort of quiet quitting way, can that not be a bit soul destroying for people, having to sort of do the performative act of whatever bare minimum is required? Because there's that thing of like it makes me think, you know, of like the Zen thing of like whatever your circumstance. I don't know if this is really a Zen thing. It might be just a sort of stereotypical idea, but you know, that if you're working in Starbucks, you know, just sort of you can get into the zone and do your job in this kind of very present, you know, mindful way, and then, you know, you kind of negate, you know, you become not a slave by just being in the now and, you know, passing through the day with you know, genuine intention or something. And I've always been a bit suspicious of that being either a spiritual truth or some sort of way of getting actually to accept the slavery.
Yeah, actually, remember, Lord, you shared this meditation 101 exercise, and I think that type of thing, which makes you more efficient for the system, even if it sounds good and you're leading a good, wholesome life, actually is a trick by the plantation.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff is.
But can I, like Lord Yu, before he passed, he was discussing about surviving the flipping, right? And he took it to the, obviously he's privy to more technical information or more modeling because he was working with, say, the Yanks on something, right, in the deep state. Now, so he went and did the whole hog on a boat near what he would believe to be the center of axis of rotation of the flip, which was near Cyprus, and was waiting it out there. I mean, it mightn't happen for 10 years, it mightn't happen for 100 years, it mightn't happen for 100, 200 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, so every step towards, preparation for, some type of extracting yourself from the plantation and perhaps surviving whatever's coming is surely a good step.
Yeah, I find like wanting to survive makes me feel a lot more stressed.
Yeah.
I find it a relaxing thing to think, you know, no, I'm fucked. I'm at the front of the queue to be fucked.
Yeah, I feel like for me, anyways, it's been a much more healthy outlook to expect to not survive. But regardless, I mean, I do agree. But like, there are ways that these kind of spiritual bypass can just kind of delude you and allow you to participate in the system. But I think it can kind of be both at the same time. Still, like, tomorrow I wake up and find myself inside of a concentration camp. So then, what of it? I think first it's important to look around and see what's going on, to realize more people are arriving every day than will ever leave. And so then now what? For me, try to organize people, see how that goes. Try to jump the wall, bring as many people with me, see how that goes. And to the degree that those things fail, I'm going to make my own peace and happiness in this life one way or the other. And yeah, if I'm on work detail, I'm going to slow it down and throw sand in the gears and do whatever I can to try to obstruct it. but this is my life to live. I'm not going to give it to the guards and be demoralized just because of that. So I don't know. It's a difficult situation, but we're all here to make the best of it.
I think more interesting than the COP and the reparations debate was in the past week in Norway. There was a huge debate that surfaced about one of the guys in Just Stop Oil in Norway called Stop Oljeletingen, Stop the Oil Search, something like that in English, who had been defacing the artwork, the sculptures in the Vigeland Park in Oslo, which is like a stone sculpture park from the 1940s. Not the Nazi 40s, but it finished in the 40s. So he defaced that with orange paint, water-based paint. Easily came off, but then for doing that, he was invited to a podcast, and then he was invited to the biggest Norwegian primetime television debate show on the NRK, on the state channel, to debate the use of sabotage and violence in the climate struggle, basically. And this guy is like 24 years old, and he's studying for the master degree in philosophy up at the NTNU University in Trondheim. So he's more like a philosopher looking into the future of the climate struggle. But of course, he was condemned for taking the V word in his mouth, the violence word, and all he really did was to say that they actually asked him the question, if you look into the future, do you think violence and sabotage will be used in the struggle in the future? And he basically said yes. And then they made these huge headlines in the newspapers. This guy wants to use violence, blah, blah, blah. So the funny thing was, instead of asking some hard questions from our English friends for blowing up the fucking pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, which was the biggest methane release ever from any single point in the history of man or whatever, in the history of methane, where the Brits actually did use explosive violence in a climate-related attack on the energy pipeline. They go after this philosopher student who is basically doing only sort of softcore Just Stop Oil style activism, which is easily fixed afterwards. You just basically water spray the sculptures in the park, and the painting comes off. So instead of asking some hard questions from the London military command for blowing up the pipeline in the Baltic Sea, they go after this little brat of 24 years who studies philosophy and tries to say whether or not there will be sabotage in the future. It's kind of strange.
It's amazing how quickly that story disappeared. The pipeline thing, it's just gone now.
Yeah, you had 3 different nations, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany, investigating it, and all of them more or less coming out and saying, yeah, we've investigated it, it was blown up, and we know who did it. Other than that, we don't want to comment anymore on that because national security. Yeah, so it's pretty clear it wasn't Russia, because they wouldn't hesitate to say, yeah, we found it was fucking Putin. So
yeah, proof of ever needed. But otherwise, that's the proof if ever it were needed that it wasn't the Russians. But again, I have conversations with people who do mention, the Russians blowing up their own pipeline, and you say, that the idea that happened is so absurd. I just
the propaganda model is strong and in effect. You know, it's the system punches down on this 24-year-old student, and it creates a red herring of a distraction. And the irony is, of course, it doesn't acknowledge its own systemic violence that it visits on us every day. It's just more of the same.
Yeah, it's like the difference between a student saying may do in the future and so the MI6 or something saying or not saying, but having actually done 2 months ago, and the guys who actually did something 2 months ago, they don't want to talk about. They would, oh, okay, that was explosive terroristic violence against Europe's main energy infrastructure. Move along, nothing to see here. We talked to this young student instead about what he might do 10 or 20 years from now. Yeah. That sounds fair.
I'm slightly embarrassed for having access to this information, but it looks like there's this bloke called Nick Hancock who's like a extremely corrupt political entity who was, I think, was like the health secretary in the UK during a certain recent lab leaked something. Was causing a few problems here and there. Anyway, this bloke's ended up on a reality show where the public can, vote for who gets to stay and who gets to go, and some sort of competition, and the winner is the person who remains, after the public votes these people out. But this bloke, who's allegedly responsible for however many deaths of people due to incompetence, irresponsibility, and possibly alleged corruption, is being propelled to the final of this TV show. It's really astonishing. So, and again, this is not the kind of news I tend to follow, but this is popped up on Twitter, and I'm embarrassed to say that I'm looking at Twitter, and I'm embarrassed to say that I know about Nick Hancock making the final of this TV show, but it was really encouraging. Yeah. Yes, Mick, I'm running to the countryside at the first possible opportunity, I think, and I've got to work out what plants and trees I can eat.
So what did this Nick guy do in relation to the pandemic?
Well, he was the health secretary, and I think one of the main things that he did was he sent elderly people with COVID to nursing homes to spread the disease to others, and allegedly is responsible therefore for a bunch of additional deaths that needn't have happened. Which again, at the moment, I'm ambivalent as to whether or not any of these narratives are sort of true or not. I've really got no idea. But anyway, the general perception is that this guy was, is responsible for making policy decisions that resulted in thousands of deaths. And I assume as well, all these like failed systems where they gave over billions of pounds for whatever it is, measures that were taken and that didn't do anything, or for buying this protection equipment that didn't work or didn't exist or didn't turn up or whatever it was. There was just like this huge like feasting at the trough scenario. But this guy was the health minister. So he's a very serious, not serious, but very senior politician who's like been like publicly disgraced. And yet the public still, votes for the guy on a TV show. Yeah, you can't really. That's the thing. I mean, I'm sort of at the time of Boris Johnson's tenancy in government. I sort of came to the conclusion that if he went and machine gunned a bunch of people in the street, that they'd still sort of go, oh, ha ha, he's such a charming rogue.
Yeah, there's such a proud tradition of that in the US. I mean, my favorite example is how much acknowledgement George H.W. Bush got because he dabbles in painting. What a lovable, likable guy, Just ignore what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. or Rudy Giuliani on Singing with the Stars. It's just, it's a type of laundering of fascism, really.
It's incredible, though. Why do people still fall? I mean, I suppose just the conditioning is so. I mean, again, this brings back the whole sort of conversation I've had with people since I was about 4 years old, which now, when I, what I'm saying and thinking is will yield the response in the normies of like, oh, so you know what's going on while we don't. Oh, you know everything. You're so clever, and you're saying that you know that this is going on. You're saying that we're brainwashed. You're so clever, blah blah blah. Yeah, I don't know. How do that, George? Am I making sense? There's that sort of what's going on? Yes, when George Bush is being lauded for his lovely paintings, is thought crime illegal? I don't know. Are you saying something there's more dodgy things than this being said on YouTube, isn't there?
No, I want to come to yeah, when you mentioned George Bush, I came across the project for the New American Century thing recently, and how they had signed off on this document prior to ever being in government. So there was 25 people signed the document for a project for the New American Century before George Bush got into power, and 10 of them ended up in George Bush's government. And then we had a number of things happened that, ended up with the war in Iraq and et cetera, et cetera. It just maybe brought me, because obviously Lord Yu was very good for looking into everything, but I didn't really have any insight on the malevolent side of the plantation, or the dark side, and there seems that there really is one. That's another reason for kicking sand in their faces, or in the gears, as Cornford said.
Yeah, Hugh, from what I've seen, talked a lot about the kind of managed situation, that we're faced with, and I just, it has a malevolent edge for sure, in my view.
So what are you doing about it?
Well, it's got malevolence and tyranny have got obsolescence built in. They need an increasing amount of energy to maintain this control. So this is the process. Is this a process of self-destruction? I wouldn't even do anything.
Yeah, it's running itself off the cliff faster than I think any of us could make it go, in my view.
That doesn't mean that acts of personal importance, resistance, and isolated wild individuals are not excluded, but they're not something that. I mean, it's part of for your well-being. If you do things like that, is that you have to do them. But I don't think anything organized is actually desirable. And in the situation that MT is describing, it would be immediately divulged. And I mean, there's hardly any group that could avoid the scrutiny of the surveillance we have now. So it's either completely underground or isolated. But that's all. I think that's what Lord Hugh was saying too.
But I suppose I was more bringing it around like to kind of strategy for, like I mentioned about Lord Hugh saying earlier, for avoiding the flippening, whatever he meant by the flippening. Like, I mean, okay, personally, I would say, because Bob asked the question earlier, avoid the crossfire from my perspective. so get out of where the danger zones. So you know, if the lights go out and food supplies are being controlled, you probably be better off not needing to line up outside the soup kitchens, you know, and be outside the areas of where there will be the most major protests and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. And avoid being in jail.
You know, I totally agree with all that. And I think looking at the material, you know, just kind of personal and real impacts of these situations, of the system of control and the, you know, the depths of the cliff it's moving us all toward. I mean, all that's really important. But, you know, I also want to say, I think another interesting dynamic to me anyway is just, you know, there's something about dignity, about being able to make moral choices, you know, not with the hope of surviving or making it through this problem. I just think there's something about dignity that wild animals and native peoples embody that we've lost in our slave mentality, you know, that's been crushed from us in this plantation. And there's just something about kind of doing whatever little resistance you can get away with that just instills dignity, which I think alone is worth living for, worth fighting for. I think that's really interesting.
Okay, it's a good point, but at the same time, when the wildebeest sees the lion coming, he doesn't stand there with dignity for the lion to eat him.
Oh yeah,
He's gonna run. He survives for another day.
yeah. I mean, you got a point. Totally.
Is this the end?
I think everybody was muted, or they thought it was the end. I was just renewing the live stream license, so feel free to just carry on.
Isn't that what this conversation is all about, anyway?
Fortunately, I think we got a couple more days at least. I don't know.
Jim Morrison turned on his head there.
The end, my friend.
It is the end. It's the end of the first 2 hours and the start of the third hour.
Have we already been all this time on the wow, yeah.
A long time ago, I read this book, Twilight of the American Culture. The author is Morris Berman, and I was just thinking about it because of what Cornfed said about what can we do while we're in the plantation or in the concentration camp. And he had a concept there. He was saying either escape America, or if you can't, then adopt the monastic option. But I can't exactly remember what that all entails. So I will read that book and I will report back to the group if I find something of value. I think he was just thinking about how to have a creative life or how to survive and live a life maybe inside this culture if you can't escape it, you know, kind of like what Cornfed was saying about being in the concentration camp but still surviving and I don't know, finding some maybe moments of peace, something like that.
Morris Berman is a brilliant bloke. I highly recommend, follow the name. He's a really great writer. He hates Americans so much. He's so derisory about people, which I really enjoy. I think he lives in Mexico now, doesn't he? He's just
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I think I mentioned one of his books before, where he examines the origins of religion.
Yeah, I have those books, but I haven't had time to read them. He does describe himself as an accelerationist, that the faster America collapses, the better it will be for everyone. At least that's what he thinks.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find anyone here who doesn't agree.
Oh,
As an
come
American,
on.
yeah.
Don't you love us?
Well, we're hot on your tails, so the faster you guys go, the faster we're going. And I,
It
for
will be at
one,
the center of the vortex here.
yeah,
Pull everyone in.
well, I think they're going to take us, out. They're going to try and take us out. They're doing that to the Europeans now, aren't they? And I don't know whether Great Britain, in inverted commas, stands, but they're gonna take out Europe, and then whether Britain gets to be the little, I think of Britain in relation to United States like that little creature that sort of jumps up and down on Jabba the Hutt in the Return of the Jedi. Is it? There's a little squeaky creature, and I think of Britain as the little pet of the United States that's gonna might be dragged along a little bit while they destroy Europe and then they destroy Britain afterwards. I don't know. So yeah, we're all
Britain just taunts Europe while America has all the bombs.
something like that probably.
Collapse now and avoid the rush is the James Michael Greer quote in the chat right now. It's a great chat. Great quote.
It's such a t-shirt. Yeah, it really is a great line.
So I wrote in the chat in this app to maybe invite this young student in Just Stop Oil Norway. Is that something people are interested in, or should we just leave it? I'm okay with both. You decide.
I mentioned before, but it sounds like fun. I don't know. Open to it.
And in naysayers, Mike, are you heavily against it, or sort of slightly against it, or just nervous about it? I guess he was nervous about it because it disappeared. Anyone else who is against? It's okay to be against.
What? Sorry, I missed that because I was busy chatting. What's your question, GS?
Yeah, my question was this young 24-year-old master student of philosophy who got into trouble in the Norwegian media this week for saying that he might be inclined to do sabotage for the climate and for the planet in the future. I was suggesting, or asking you guys rather, to try to get him on this show as a guest, or a special guest or something next week. And we have including me, we have 3 people who thinks that is okay proposition. And I think MD was against, and it just disappeared. So I don't know. But what do you think?
What would the reason for objection be?
I think Mike said that we would attract attention from the usual spooks or security people, but I think that train left a long time ago for this cut.
Okay, yeah, I don't know about that. I suppose, yeah, I understand people's reservation if that's the case. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a strong view. I don't know all of this. I remember when I was in India way back when, hanging around Tibetans, that there was this sort of vague acknowledgement that the Chinese spooks had a file on you if you spent a couple of days in that community, and that seemed quite titillating at the time. But I don't know really. Are they listening and watching? There was, Hugh was always very, had very strong feelings about, security and all of this, and I'm never really sure what the parameters are. But it's one of those things that as soon as if you discuss it in too much depth, then that seems to be almost, what is it? It's self-referential, isn't it? If you start talking about what the parameters of discussion are, then you're getting into the discussion that you're not sure about the parameters of. And then you read that page on Deep Green Resistance about security culture, and that's even more opaque.
I think we can be pretty sure that they are listening, but like maybe one or two young new recruits.
There's a
in
robot
some of the
somewhere.
services.
Yeah, but those new recruits might be looking to get a promotion, and who knows? I mean,
Yeah, but it's like if some people in Norway listen to it, and some people in the UK, maybe some people in Germany because of the pipeline blowout thing.
yeah,
I don't, I just don't think having this master student on who was recently on the most prominent debate show on Norwegian television. It's kind of like, yeah, he's already been on there. He didn't say anything very radical.
yeah.
He might do something illegal a decade into the future. What's the big deal? So
yeah,
I think it's interesting to talk to him. Maybe we could get him to calm down a bit, because like in my own view, there's no point to doing, or there's no possibility to saving the climate situation as I see it.
Yeah.
How would he react to that kind of proposition? Maybe just being 24 years old, having a really busy life, means that he cannot. He hasn't had time to really look into feedback loops that makes it more or less impossible to stop this freight train. I think it's a lot of interesting content to come from such a conversation with him. I don't think we will get on some terrorist non-flight list or something for doing it, but I'm open to people who don't want it, and I'm also a lazy person, so if you don't want me to spend a lot of energy trying to make it happen, I'm fine with that too.
Laziness
say
is
so.
a true revolution, Torstein. I suppose that my view is that if you don't explicitly talk about, I mean, again, I suppose the thing is, what's the trick about talking hypothetically about scenarios? I remember that there was a conversation with you and Hugh where you talked about some fairly dicey stuff, quite an old one, and then you went, "Oh, this is about my novel." Well, I'm talking about my novel, and I'm thinking, well, that's not going to fly. And
yeah, that was while both he and I were writing, a climate novel, and he finished it before me. So yeah, it's like you can never really talk to a writer, because you don't know if he's talking fiction or real life. And
the thing is, like, if somebody decided to come and get you, then that's not going to fly. You don't stand a chance with that. As in, if you then found yourself discussing, I mean, what really shocked me was back when there were riots in England a few years ago, and anybody who expressed any sympathy or understanding for why riots might occur, without any, even people who didn't say, yeah, there should be riots or whatever. Yeah, the people were rounded up at that time for even like talking about the possibility there may be a reason for there to be riots. People were rounded up for, you know, enticement. So I guess that's the one reservation I have about these sort of conversations is whether, you know, at some point we are going to be rounded up. You know, I think it's a matter of time in the UK before there are work camps. So these immigrants now who are all locked in these like terrible detention centres will end up being put to work, and the general public go, yeah, right, yeah, these people came over here and they're all living in hotels, blah, 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 and they should be put to work. So they'll be sent down like whatever, the Cornwall reopened tin mines or whatever they're going to do in their desperation. And then slowly that'll feed out to people on unemployment benefits. They'll be put to work. There'll be work camps, work makes you free, and so on. And the people will support it, and eventually 80% of the population will be in work camps. So I guess that's sort of coming, and any of the people who've done anything even remotely dodgy or said anything remotely dodgy, then there'll be a sort of computer system, AI system will be set up, and somebody will go, right, okay, anybody who said anything dodgy is going in this category, and they'll work down the list so that, you know, all the Just Stop Oil people, anybody who sprayed paint on an oil company building, or anybody who held up the M25 or whatever, or you know, whatever, they'll be on, you know, the A list, and they'll be rounded up. And then anybody who said, I quite like some of the stuff that Roger Hallam said, or I once watched a Roger Hallam video more than 10 minutes, will be on the B list, and they'll be rounded up afterwards, you know, and they'll work their way down the list until there's no one left, right, except for the like people in Kensington.
Well, I've had meetings. I've had meetings with the spooks back in Norway. You know, after my first novel came out, everybody in the security business just loved my first novel. I don't know why. So we had like 3 meetings. They paid for my coffee. I was quite poor at that time. So we had 3 meetings over like a year, and they just figured out, oh, this guy is really, really boring. He hasn't got anything interesting going on. I think we just leave it. You know, it's like the most boring guy in southern Norway. So yeah.
Yeah,
But I think they caught on to me because I released a novel about stuff.
And they interviewed you. You were actually spoken to. Is this something we can discuss?
It was very, very boring. Interestingly, relating to you, who was in Greece, I remember they asked me on the very first date. We were sitting on the edge of a basin, you know, a water basin thing, in the sun, and they were asking me, "Oh, yeah, anarchism. That's interesting, Torstein. So, do you have any contacts with anarchists in Greece?" And this was like, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So, whatever, 10 years ago. So very strange interview. But,
so they'll be dragging you off to the work camp before me, then, Torstein.
No, they found me so boring, so incredibly boring, and so I don't know. You know, when you're intellectual and talks about stuff instead of doing stuff. So I was totally the wrong guy to sort of have in their aims, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of my old self-defense when I was younger, of talking a lot. And when you talk a lot, they leave you alone.
Yeah, basically they leave you alone if you talk a lot, because if you actually are a good saboteur, you shut the fuck up, you know.
I wouldn't know. I have no idea.
Of course you wouldn't know.
And on that
Sophie,
bombshell, is this coming to the
Sophie,
end now?
yeah, but Sophie, are you still there? What do you think about the inviting this young student to come talk philosophy with us?
Oh, is Sophie still there?
I think she's out walking her dog. Sophie. Maybe if you speak, Bob, you can make her dog bark or something and wake her up.
Hello, good morning. I don't know. I think, does this bring proceedings to an end now? I think it's been going on for like 3 hours.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, she's on. Sorry, mic problem. She says. We have like 4 people, including me, who are positive to getting Joachim on the show. So I think I will reach out to him. I'm on his Twitter and hear what he has to say about visiting this show. It's an interesting comment from Oswald you can see on the screen. Yeah, I can read it. Going south, I sent your show to a British podcaster who just interviewed one of Hallam's former underlings named Frank White. One of them might be interested. Yeah, thanks for that, Oswald. We'll try this young Norwegian guy first. I think Norwegian students speak English, so it should be okay. I can check out your guy, Frank White.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
I couldn't. There was something gone wrong with my microphone. I couldn't answer your. Anyway, it's too late now.
Yeah, do you want to say something about inviting this guy, Sophie?
Sorry, I missed that.
Do you want to say something about inviting this young Norwegian student guy from Just Stop Oil?
From Just Stop Oil, why not? Have you got a contact? Can you?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
on his
yeah,
Twitter. So
yeah, well, listen, why not? Why don't we interact a bit directly with people who are still activists? Yeah, why not? Why not? Why not? Yeah, I agree.
cool. I think it can be very interesting because he's studying philosophy. I'm pretty sure he's been into SAP maybe because he's also Norwegian.
Doesn't
And
that
there's a
just
lot
mean
of
someone who's spent years reading Kant?
more like Nietzsche, perhaps. Yeah, that kind of stuff. If you
Sounds
talk about Sappho, it's maybe more like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, I think. Yeah.
Oh, so we need to do some intense preparation before the meeting.
No, absolutely not. But I think,
No, I'm joking.
but I think if you narrow down to kind of the eco-action side of philosophy, you have people like Uncle Ted. We have people like this Finnish guy who I can never remember the name of. This Link or something. And then we have like Arne Næss, maybe David Foreman from Earth First is a kind of philosopher. And then we have, of course, the anti-civilization guys like Zerzan. I know some people in the YouTube chat are very into Zerzan, John Zerzan. Running on Emptiness. What's the other title? Is something called the failure of symbolic thought, actually, which we talked about earlier. That's kind of the curriculum for the eco philosophy.
It's interesting to see the interactions going on the stream at the same time as here. So the silence here is kind of balanced with with the text of people on the stream. And is this the end?
Yeah, this is the end, isn't it? I think we need to be able to end. I think this is the end.
Do you want to do the end thing, Bob?
I'll do the end thing, yeah, by all means. This is the end. This is the very end, my friends. Thank you very much to everybody who's attended this wonderful meeting. We are now going to take a moment's silence to let everything that's passed here pass on. We're going to let all the thoughts, feelings, and any cogitations that we've dwelled on for the last few hours flow away like the curry that I had yesterday. Let's take a moment's silence to let it all go. Ding! Om Shanti Om. I still haven't worked out how to pronounce the thing that Hugh used to say. I mean, that's one of
We'll have to practice that one. I could never say it either.
I'll go and work out how to say it and then incorporate that next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very